Hi, and welcome to Arts and Entertainment.
With Chris and Randall.
I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
Welcome to our show. Uh, Always glad. If you're new to the show, welcome. If you're returning to the show, welcome. And before we even start the show, I always say, please like the show, subscribe to the show, and comment about the show. And when I say like, I mean just hit click like. If you don't like something we say, that's the beauty of comment. If you love something we say, it's the beauty of comment. But please, we want to hear what you have to say. We want to keep this terrific dialogue going between us and you. Today, Randall, you've came up with a really fascinating topic. Let's hear it.
Okay, well, I wanted to discuss the aesthetics of video games. I guess I'll just talk about right off the top my idea about video games. I had wondered why video games are so compelling for a long time, and one day I thought, well, maybe it's because they cause and effect with video games is closely intertwined. So when you push a button on a video game, you get an instant response, and this is not something that happens in life very often. But that's true of a lot of games. That's the point of all games. But let's talk about, before we get into that, I guess, Chris, let's talk about our background in video games so we can let the audience know where we're at. I mean, I'll just say that I love video games growing up. I played like constantly through high school. When I went to college, I decided I had to quit. Yeah, I mean, I kind of play some silly cell phone games now, but that remind me of the old NES days. I was always playing on the NES back in the day, Sega Genesis, that sort of thing. Computer games. What about you, Chris? Did you ever play any video games growing up?
I still remember I was in a store in 1975, New York City, back when they used to sell electronics, and I saw the first Atari, and I thought this was the coolest thing. We could play games. I had played at a cousin's house Pong, which was just this like ball that went boom, boom. You had to put a piece of gray paper over the TV set in order for it to even work back then. This one didn't have the gray paper. This one just connected to your TV, and you could play Tank Battle, and you could play Pong, and you could play like this plane thing. It was very like, I don't know. Did you ever see those really first generation Ataris?
Yeah, so you put like a plastic sheet over the screen.
That was the one after that, and then the one we got was just the pixels. Do you even call them pixels?
They were pixels.
They were so primitive. And I remember my sister and I just thought this was like the most amazing thing. And I think I was 9, maybe 10. And I definitely remember going to the arcades and playing like Asteroids, which would like have that vector graphics in it, and Tank Battle. And then I remember in the early 80s when Nintendo came out and they had Space Invaders. And I think around the time I was 13, I got into Dungeons and Dragons, and I just kind of lost interest in video games because I liked the more immersive quality and the extended stories of Dungeons and Dragons, and it was a group activity. And after that, I never really went back to video games. To this day, just recently during the pandemic, to stay engaged in life, my girlfriend and I, we play card games and we do puzzles. But no, I don't really play video games. I know very little about the last 40 years of video games.
How many years do you think you played Dungeons and Dragons?
Not long. I think it was about 2 years. And then I got into dating and girls and such. And then I lost interest in that too.
It's interesting because some people have talked about this now that you bring it up. But I think a lot of video games owe their game mechanics to Dungeons and Dragons. Gary Gygax, he invented a lot of mechanics for Dungeons and Dragons that would be later used in just about every video game, like the idea of hit points for your life and turning everything into a numerical value.
It certainly seems to be there's a lot of sword and sorcery in video games, and sword and sorcery was a lot of fun in Dungeons and Dragons. I always had hoped I think I may have bought a guide on how to do like a spy game that was like Dungeons and Dragons, except instead of being in a dungeon, you were in Berlin in the 60s as a spy. I forgot the exact model. It was a little complicated for my taste, but yeah, it was, I guess as you were just saying with cause and effect, it's hypertext, right? So, in Dungeons and Dragons, you roll the dice, and after you attack someone, God, it's more than 40 years now, or you go into one room, but you make a choice, and the choice you make has an effect that moves the full story into a particular direction. And from what I can see from contemporary video games, of which I know so very little, that's very similar, right?
Yeah. So I think I'm struck by that close coupling of cause and effect in video games, because I feel like in real life it almost doesn't exist. I mean, let's say you want a job, right? You send out resumes, you apply for a job, maybe you actually get a job, but you never actually know why you got the job, right? I mean,
At best, you can always guess.
you can
I
guess.
mean, you can come up with a reasonable guess. Oh, I got that job because the person who hired me went to school with my uncle, or I got that job because I'm an award-winning athlete, or something like that. But you're right. Most of us, most of the time, operate in the dark as to why things go well or go poorly in our lives. That's the fate, we call that, right?
Right. And I think that's why video games are so compelling, because when you start playing them, it's like a whole different universe where cause and effect, you can witness it
There,
firsthand. They happen instantaneously. All games are like that, right?
are you saying basically the philosophy of the video game is determinist? Like my actions form my destiny in a video game.
Yes. I mean, the control people have in video games, I think, is one of the things that makes them so entertaining and compelling.
And that's certainly not true in a lot of other activities in life. Or they are, but not to the same literal extent. Like, if I'm playing a game of gin and I let a card go and the other player wins, I guess technically, and I played that card, I would have won. But all that means is I just lost a round of the game. But in video games, the stakes are often life or death, right? So
Hmm.
your ability to move up the next level or stop playing that particular game can be just on the wink of one bad call, right? Or one good call.
Yeah, yeah. And you can see the results of all the calls, right, as they happen in real time. I mean, in life, everything seems much more murky, and you don't have nearly the control in life as you do in a game, right? I mean, I think this is why it might appeal to younger people even, right? Because
Well, I mean, you definitely have that stereotypical idea of a video gamer as an adolescent boy struggling with finding control in his own life. So he plays video games because that's where he has control. I mean, you have these movies like The Last Starfighter, right? Or Ready Player One, where you have these boys with no social skills who somehow learn how to become real heroes because they sat down in front of a computer. I found it fascinating in researching for this show that actually, 30 some odd percent of gamers are 18 to 34, and another 25% of gamers are between 34 and 54, which is our ages. And roughly speaking, it's almost a 50-50 split between men and women, maybe slightly more men, but not that much. And it's certainly decreasing as time goes by. So, yeah, the reality versus the stereotype is completely different.
so you thought there would be more, what, like teenagers playing?
I really did bite into the stereotype. It's some 13-year-old boy who has poor social skills, who just stays in his house all day playing video games because, he can't connect with the outside world and his great eye-hand coordination. And now I realize literally almost a billion people on planet Earth every day, every second, of all backgrounds, ethnicities, everything you can make a human being, all are universally connected to the experience of playing video games, or as you like to say, living in a universe where cause and effect, and as you say, the compression of time are so much within your own control, or the environment, the physics of that environment are so much more ideal than the physics of our own life.
Oh yes, video game physics are always ideal, right? I mean, in the real world, there's many more variables, and it's much more complicated, and
And you
it
do,
can be
yeah.
frustrating.
And in real life, of course, you don't have unlimited lifetimes to just.
You
And
don't
in
have
real
multiple
life,
tries.
right? You don't have, and also, I mean,
And real life is
I,
also not constantly rewarding you like on a regular basis with small rewards. I mean, as video game makers will do. I mean, you probably don't know that because you haven't played a game in a long time, but
right.
this is the general way they design games now. They're trying to reward people on a regular basis. Like life, when was the last time? I mean, does life reward you on a regular basis?
Well, that's an interesting point, because I asked my girlfriend, who's a professor of psychology, about this experience, because we're really doing a lot of puzzle work. And I have gotten very addicted to puzzles, because when I can get a piece to fit another piece, she explained to me, the brain releases a degree of dopamine that makes the sensation very pleasing. So I think, even regardless of whether or not a video game does give you a physical, some sort of tangible reward, probably, I'm going to guess, your brain is going to release dopamine every time you defeat an opponent, or you move up a level, or you access the magical sword, or whatever it is you do. I'm hoping I'm not BSing my way through this, but basically every victory you experience, no matter how great or how small, can trigger dopamine in your brain, which is probably why people get it. You were talking to me about flow states in video games.
Yeah, there's an article. I think I'll link some of the background articles we use for this show in the description so people can understand. Yeah, there's a old Wired essay about flow in video games. The author of the article is trying to say that is making the case that flow, the state of flow, is what people are trying to get out of video games.
Yeah, and that might be why people will spend hours playing video games, right? I mean, again, from what I've observed, man, I really am out of my depths here, but you're the experience, right? People will sit in front of the game and play it for hours.
I think
right?
it's because the game designers, they do it intentionally. Okay, they've designed these games to give a ladder of rewards, small rewards that hopefully ramp up over time, and they stretch that
Right.
out as much as possible. It's just like I mean, a lot of people, commentators, and this isn't any of our background research, but I've read this in the past. A lot of commentators say it's like a slot machine, right? I mean, it's like, it's not just video games. It's just about anything on a smartphone, right? Twitter, Facebook. It's like every time you see a new message, you get a little dopamine hit. It's just like you're talking about with the puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
Well, I guess my question for you is, Chris, do you feel when you do a puzzle and you get that dopamine hit when you put the piece in there? Do you get that feeling in real life at all?
Oh, I definitely think when we play puzzles, we'll spend a couple hours working on the puzzle. Now, in fairness, it's a little harder for middle-aged Chris to get into more than an hour and a half of flow state with a puzzle, because I eventually find myself experiencing eye strain, and I just have to walk away from the puzzle or walk around I literally have to get up and walk away. While I'm playing it, while I'm putting together a puzzle. Wow, this is really becoming a show about puzzles. I'm so sorry.
No,
I'll get
it's
back.
good. Go
But
on.
my point is, you have to walk around the puzzle, look at it from different angles, move the pieces into different compartments, and invariably, you just want to take a half hour or a couple hours off, because if you take the break, your brain will find another piece, and it always does, that you didn't. So in some sense, the puzzle also comes with what I like to call a break, like a built-in break, so you never OD on the puzzle. Same for, say, the flow state I get when I'm reading a book. At some point, my eyes also just give out on me, or I get tired and I got to go to sleep, or when I'm binge watching Netflix, there just comes a point where, like, in a lot of things that would normally, some part of me would just give out first. But I'm guessing, from what I've seen as an outsider, with the design of the technology, in both access to it through, say, as you say, the phones, or the goggles or the computers or the graphics or the headphones that you can go longer inside the video game experience with less wear and tear on the body, at least without getting as quickly exhausted as you can from, say, what I just said, reading a book, watching a Wagnerian opera, or playing a puzzle.
Well, I think your experience with puzzles is relevant to video games. There's a genre of video games called puzzle games, and puzzles figure prominently into a lot of different video games.
Oh, don't tell me that. Now I'm going to play video games.
There are, I don't think there's, well, I don't know. Have you played Tetris? Tetris has puzzle elements.
Yeah, a lot of people I know are really addicted to Tetris, but maybe because I'm dyslexic and I have issues with spatial relations, which is also probably why I never got into video games, because I'm just really bad at them. No, I've never been a fan of Tetris. Well, long answer for a short question.
That is interesting that you love puzzles, but you don't like Tetris. My girlfriend, she loves puzzles, and she also plays, I think it's Bejeweled or Candy Crush.
Oh, I remember that. And my girlfriend, I think my girlfriend also plays Candy Crush.
Yeah, those are puzzle games.
What's up with that?
They're puzzle. I used to work in a video game store years ago.
Yeah,
and women have always loved puzzle games. Men do too, but
but there was a study, and I'm not being sexist here, because I remember there was a study that did show that for whatever reason, Tetris, and there was a time really where it was a very male-dominated industry, but I remember reading that because it was mostly like, I'm just gonna fucking kill this person, I'm gonna beat this person up, I'm gonna steal, I'm gonna rape, I'm gonna rob, and my avatar is 90% of the time male or a porn star. But I do remember reading an article years ago that a lot of women really liked Tetris and the way that they shape things. And I do know that I believe there are, it's without being sexist, it's such a fine line. But it's certainly true that I think certain games appeal to certain genders more than others. It may have to do with the brain. It may have to do with hormones. I don't know. But certainly it's very nice that as game design evolves, they have found through research and development how to create games that appeal to just about everybody, or at least enough types of people so that as many people can get involved in the gaming industry can.
Well,
video gaming.
Well, I love video games from a kid, and you'd be surprised. There's all sorts of different kinds of video games out there. I mean, the variety is just absolutely incredible. I mean,
Are we dating ourselves, by the way, by using the word video game?
What should we call it? Interactive entertainment?
Well, it's weird, right? Because, technically, computer game, video game, these things make no sense. I called it gaming a moment ago, but gaming technically means the gambling industry.
I think it's
games more relevant to call this the gaming industry.
I think video games is a great term. I think games based around a video screen. Yeah, I think I've always thought it's a good term. Well, what, Chris?
I want to ask you a question, Randall.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I really like where you're headed with this question of rewards and real life. And one of the things that this was certainly true when I was playing video games, and I believe this is true in every video game since the first arcade games, is the process of moving up a level, right? You move up a level, you increase in status. I used to love writing my name in the top scores. And then I loved writing obscene names after that, like sex, right? 3 letters, SCX.
Oh, that was you.
GOD, right?
What games were you writing that on?
Oh, Asteroids. I was really good at Asteroids because I go boom, 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 boom. So, and Space Invaders. Wait, let me get. I'm sorry, folks. It was a long weekend, and I am really trying very hard to remember what was the last word I had to say. So the thing about going up a level is you're in a brand new world, or you're not in a brand new world, but you're in a better world, or you're in a more challenging environment, and you've achieved something, and you have status because you can say to your friends, I just played Pac-Man and I got up to the 3rd level. Well, I got up to the 5th level. Damn, that's really cool. So like the more levels you go, and I know they have championships and such, but in real life, social mobility, financial mobility, physical mobility, and elevation in status, and a more challenging life in general, I don't think these things are as easily achievable as they are in video games. And I would argue, if we look at America since the 1970s with the rise of video games, social mobility in general has gone down. And it might be that there's a correlation between people getting more stagnant in their own lives and their jobs and their marriages, in their homes and their financial situation. And because their lives are not as good as their parents or their grandparents, they escape now to video games where they can kind of get what they can't get in real life, which is that ability to have that achievement.
Yeah, you know what, Chris? I wasn't thinking about that at all for this episode, but that was a great point. Yeah, you totally said it perfectly. You know, I want to bring up there is a genre of game in Japan, the simulation game, that is extremely popular. And unless you are really into video games, you don't know this, right?
Well, that would be me. I don't know.
Right,
this.
right. Most people don't know this. So the simulation games are like very boring. It's like they're never sold outside of Japan, basically. Like they have games where you're a train conductor, for instance, on the Japanese subway. And it tries to be super hyper realistic. You're actually a train conductor on the Japanese subway.
Wow.
And there's tons of games like that in Japan where they're just simulation of like a normal day-to-day job, right? And they sell big in Japan. And commentators have said that the reason they think they sell so big in Japan is because in Japan they have a very, like you've described, they have a very stratified society where most people, they don't have a lot of choices in life, right? So when they graduate school, when they go through school, you know, they're going to do what their parents did. They're going to stay in the same class. You know, they're not going to deviate from their very small, from the very small number of choices set out for them in life, right? So people buy these simulation games so that they can see what their life would have been like if they, I don't know, could have had a job that they actually wanted to do. Or they could, you know, see in America, we don't have that. We don't have that, right? Because in America, people go job hopping all the time, right? And
well, it's just really interesting. Yeah, exactly. We're so, yeah, go on.
and in Japan, that doesn't happen as often. So in America, you go job hopping and you get to experience a lot of different things, right? You get to experience a lot of different jobs. But in Japan, I guess that doesn't happen. So they have simulation games. But what you're saying, you know, about our society becoming more stratified and classes becoming more rigid, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, are you born into the class you're in and you just stay in that class forever now? And so the only way to get out of that is to play a video game, right?
Well, I guess in some ways, I really want to separate the game that is kind of like, we'll go with Candy Crush or Tetris, where it's just a diversion and you're just producing small amounts of dopamine by just occupying a little bit of your day doing something like that. It's the same as being on Facebook and getting a like or posting something. And what we're really talking about now, which are these deep narrative infused video games with strong stories, visually, sonically, just full worlds, very developed, they really are, I would argue, an alternative reality, right? And I remember last year, I got some VR goggles for a little while, and I was really amazed how immersive alternative reality is. And I wasn't even playing a game. I was just watching stuff. So I would imagine for those, the more you enter that world through the headphones, through the VR, through augmented reality, the more you can really forget. You can get lost in that world and not have to think about the world you're in. And I don't want to go back to that 13-year-old's cliche that they're disconnected, they can't connect to the world. And yeah, I can see that's where I'm headed. But I do worry, I'm sorry to say, I do worry that as people become more and more frustrated with their own quality of their own personal lives, that they will escape into these simulacra games just so they can experience all the things that they can't experience in their own life. I mean, weirdly enough, you've read a lot of Philip K. Dick, right?
No, I haven't.
You saw Total Recall?
I've seen the movies, yes.
All right, okay, even though Total Recall is a pretty mad adaptation of the Philip K. Dick short story, We Can Dream It For You Wholesale, the premise of both of those are that, people who are so bored in their own world, in their own lives, will one day pay for the experience of being in a fantastical universe where they get to be the hero. And I do think that it's weird to think about it, because at the time that the book was written in the 50s, early 60s, a lot of Americans actually had lived heroic lives. They had fought in wars. They had lived through depressions. Their lives really were like a video game. They didn't have to go that far out. But up until very recently, I would argue, most Americans' lives have been very safe, sedate, and controlled, and don't allow for a great deal of active heroism. That video games of what we're talking about now, as we narrow our focus,
yeah,
really promise.
Yeah, Chris, can you imagine? I mean, maybe they do, but can you imagine a World War II vet sitting down and playing like a modern first-person shooter like Call of Duty, like a World War II
What would be the
simulation?
point? I'm not.
Why would he want to?
I'm not going to brag, but my dad, as a small boy, fled communists. Sorry, as a small boy, was hidden from Nazis, and then as a teenager, fled communists. Then he would go on to come to America as an immigrant, go to a top college, go to a top law school, and become very successful. He lived, like, quite literally not an ideal existence, but a very, in my mind, he went up many levels and he fought many obstacles.
In real life.
In real life. So I can't make that same claim, which is because he fought hard for me not to have to live in that world. But it seems a bit perverse that the only way I could match him in his accomplishments and his risks would be to escape into such a simulacra universe. And I don't even know if it's appropriate. And I really feel bad because I can see where this conversation is going. So I do want to make a couple positive comments about video games, just because I have friends who play it and I respect them and I understand it. And I do feel kind of like, oh, there's got to be a counter argument here. I do think that it's tough. It's really tough. If this is something that you enjoy, and if this is something you're spending time with, I think I can't defend it because I obviously don't share your view, but I'm really hoping that you will comment on this episode, and then we can do a second episode where we at least look at your counter argument. I know I call them video games. Video games are used. They have empathy video games, which teach empathy. I know there's educational video games. I know they employ a lot of people. I mean, I'm really trying to come up with all the good.
Chris, you don't have to defend video games as an art form. And in fact, let's go on to the second part of the show. We talk about video games, whether or not they're art or how they qualify as art, okay?
Yeah, so I mean, why video games is really, I think, what this whole thing comes down to. And it's always going to be really personal. I mean, Randall, don't you feel that at the end of the day, your experience, my experience, we can only speak from those places.
Yeah, of course.
And we definitely would like to hear, especially from those people who disagree with us, what's your why for the video game? What is it that we overlooked? What is it? We're going to do a second part where we don't really get into the philosophy, but we ask the question, is video games an art form? Or is it just a form of business, entertainment? Sorry. Ooh. Are video games an art form, or are they a form of entertainment? And what is the difference? And we hope you stick around for that episode. It's next. I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
Thanks for watching or listening.